Hello, my name is Mike, and this is a bike. Now some of you might recognize this bike. Yeah, I did a couple of videos on it before, and this particular bike, I bought it really cheap, which is pretty much all I do when it comes to buying vehicles, and it needed some repair. I got it running only to find it wouldn't move. So the assumption was that it had a bad transmission. After a little bit of investigation, I found that it was not the transmission, it was actually a stripped output shaft sprocket. The sprocket was all the splines had rounded out. I happened to have a sprocket to fit it. I put the new sprocket on it, and lo and behold, it actually rides and moves and does motorcycle-y things. But one thing I did notice when I put that sprocket on is when I slid it over the splines of the output shaft, there was some play in it. We don't want play in that shaft. So I did what any good motorcycle mechanic would do, is I put a bunch of silicone on it, crammed it on there, and over-torqued the nut that holds the sprocket to the shaft. Now, I was just going to sell the bike and get rid of it cheap, let it go down the road, but, well, I got this infection in my brain called a conscience. And I can't sell a bike in good conscience knowing somebody's only going to ride it for a few thousand miles and get stranded somewhere because that damaged shaft is going to spin and destroy the splines on the new sprocket as well. It's not going to last. So I knew it was really a temporary fix, if nothing else. And I kind of debated because I've got an engine that I already built, put a new transmission in it. It's all ready to go into one of the early bikes. So I debated whether to put that engine in it or keep the original Sport Cruiser engine in it because it's painted differently. It looks a little bit different. And so I debated back and forth and then debated some more. And then I did one of the things I do really well. I procrastinated. Yep, it's been over a year. And it's been sitting on the side of my house collecting bird poop and dust. Not only that, but it also collected a bad fuel pump. Yep. It sat long enough that the fuel and the fuel pump they're not happy anymore. So now I have even more work to do. I've got to resurrect the fuel system, get it to be able to run again. But I also have to go into the transmission and do it right. Now I do have an output shaft I could simply put in it, but if I'm going to go to the trouble of splitting the case, I'm going to do the full upgrade. I'm going to put a whole new set of gears in it, and a new set of gears means a new different output shaft and a new different output shaft sprocket pulley assembly. And then the bike will be bulletproof. It'll be a good bike. I can sell it in good conscience. Now, some of you have actually requested that I do a video on fork seals. Well, I did do a video on my cross country, which is parked out there, but I haven't done a video on the fork seals on one of the early bikes. They're a little bit different, same general idea. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, why would he do the fork seals before the bike's even rideable? And I was really kind of pleased because somebody actually wanted to watch one of my videos. They were actually looking to me to make an instructional video. The fools. Anyway, so I'm going to go along with the fools, and I'm actually going to start off, before I even get it running, before I even get the fuel pump and the transmission, I'm going to do the fork seals. Because the fork seals are something somebody will actually watch. And who knows, I might even get another subscriber out of the deal. I'm never going to get monetized. Anyway, stick around.
Somewhere in a dusty, dirty back alley in western Arizona, not far from historic Route 66, is an old fart trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. He'll work on anything, just as long as it's got at least 2 cool wheels.
Okay, now that we've got the front wheel and the fender removed, we can go ahead and proceed to remove the lower tube from the upper tube. I don't know if it really showed up in the video, but the front fender on the Sport Cruiser is held on by 2 bolts on each side. If you're dealing with a standard cruiser, it actually has 4 bolts on each side. The standard cruiser and the Sport Cruiser are a little bit different. As you can see, you've got dual discs on the Sport Cruiser, and the standard cruiser just has a single disc, like that one there. But the other kind of main difference is the diameter of the tube is a little bit bigger on the Sport Cruiser. These are 50 millimeter, and the standard cruiser is 45 millimeter. But other than that, the construction is the same. These forks are made by an Italian company called Marzocchi, something like that. And so the parts, if you're looking for parts for like internal components and bushings and things like that, a lot of times you can source them outside of Victory and look for Marzocchi stuff. Anyway, the fender's held on not by bolts, but by these little, they're like sleeves, and they go through the fender into a hole in the fender, and then the bolt holds the sleeve. So the sleeve holds the fender, and the bolt holds the sleeve. Kind of a interesting setup, but it works. Then, in order to remove the lower section from the upper section, there's an Allen bolt down through here. Now, to reach that Allen bolt, a regular Allen type socket typically doesn't reach. This is one I've kind of cobbled together for that purpose. It was just a regular 5/16. It's actually technically 8 millimeter, but they're interchangeable. It was a 5/16 Allen socket that as you can see, it's been ground down a little bit to fit the recess. And then I took a piece of a Allen wrench and cut it off so it would be long enough. You got to have a really long reach. You could use a regular Allen wrench, but I kind of like using the socket because a lot of times it's really tight and it's hard to break it loose without a little bit of assistance from an air tool or something like that. So this guy is going to go right up inside here, and it's actually above where the axle goes. And if you look, you can see the Allen's got to go all the way past the axle hole. Get in there. Start. There we go. And so that's how you take the bolts out. But of course, before I take that bolt out, I'm going to make sure I got a pan here to catch the oil. And the other thing I want to do before I take that bolt out of the bottom is I want to take these dust seal caps off and remove the retainer that holds the seal. And the reason for that is when you take this tube off, a lot of times that seal will pop right out. It'll save you a step. If it doesn't, then I'll show you another way to get that seal out. But I always like to get that ready so that when the tube slides down, if that seal pops out, we could take advantage of that. To get this cap off, you got to go in here with a tool and break it loose. It's just held on by an O-ring, but when these bikes get old, that O-ring dries out and hardens up, and sometimes these are a real bear to get loose. So we're just going to go in here with a hammer and a screwdriver, see if we can knock it loose and get this upper cap off. Boy, they just don't want to come loose. And what's happening is as I'm knocking it up, the whole lower fork is moving instead of breaking this loose. So I hung the tire back on it just to add some ballast to kind of hold the fork tubes down. So when I drive the caps up, there's a better chance that they'll actually come loose. At least that's the plan. There goes. Now she's coming loose. A little help from the wheel. Now you can see that really dry O-ring. It's keeping it from coming loose. Oh look, the O-ring even broke. Yeah, so it's a dealio. Whew, this one's grody. Yeah, pretty brittle.
So you can see the snap ring there. That's what I want to remove. Now when the tube comes down, the bushing might actually knock that seal out. So yeah, we'll do the same on this side.
Alright, now we can take that Allen bolt out. When you take the bolt out, keep your eyes open because there's a little copper washer in there. It's a sealing washer. You don't want to lose it. Some people will probably tell you to replace it even, get a new one each time. I've reused the old ones and not had a leak, so that's just been my experience. Going the right way? No. Come on now. Whoa. Alright. Here we go. That was a juicy one. Now once all the oil drains out, you just go ahead and pull the tube off. You might have to give it a hard yank to get it past the seal, or to pop the seal out, whichever occurs. My goodness, there was a lot of oil in this one. I think somebody overfilled it. Typically it's around 14 to 16 ounces, something like that on the sport cruisers. Let's see if this tube will work with us here. Yeah, she's stuck. She's getting a little stuck. I might have to help it with a hammer. It's not one to come out. We'll give it a nudge. Come on down. Typically I don't have to beat on them that much, but okay, so there's our cap. We'll talk about the seals on this cap. If you bought a seal kit from All Balls, you'll get the actual seal, and they'll give you supposedly a dust cap, but it doesn't work with these. It works with the later bikes. These ones actually use a seal from a hydraulic system. So if you go to a hydraulic supply store, you can get this seal matched up. I went to a couple local places. I brought a sample with me, and they found one. It fit perfectly. So when you go to buy a seal kit, you don't need to get the one that includes a dust seal because it's not going to be the right one. And then there's our seal. We'll get this out. It didn't come out with the. Sometimes this bushing here is enough to pop that seal out. This time it was not. You always want to inspect your bushings, make sure they're in good shape. You got one bushing at this end, and then there's another bushing right below the seal here. So just throw an eyeball on it, make sure it doesn't look torn up or anything. Like I said, replacements are available if you need to replace those bushings as well. Now, the first few of these that I did, I took the entire fork out of the triple tree, tried to hold it in a vise to take it apart. It didn't work out well. I kind of damaged the tube. That's kind of the reason I like to leave the tubes on the bike. They're the best way to hold it still, so you can separate the halves. But that also presents a problem because now I've got to somehow hold this and get that seal out. So what I do is just the reverse. Instead of holding this and trying to pry the seal out, I've actually clamped a pry bar in my vise. It's kind of a wide spoon-ish shaped pry bar. And the reason we want to use this is so we can get a pretty good dig under that seal. You don't want a really pointy one. I've actually scratched and damaged the tube. And here's kind of the tricky part. When we go to engage it to pop the seal out, we want to get under the seal, and we don't want to damage this bushing back behind it. This is the bushing. It's a soft material. And then there's a spacer, like a washer, between the bushing and the seal. We want to get the edge of that pry bar right on top of that washer thingy, and then under the seal to be able to pop it out. Now the snap ring's already been removed, so at this juncture it's just a friction fit, interference fit, so it should be able to be popped out. You'll notice there's a lot of schmutz. Before we put all this back together, we're going to go through about 17.4 gallons of brake cleaner spray. This is a stubborn one. Ooh, I damaged the edge. Dang it. How did I manage that? Never had that happen before. That ain't good. Dang it. There it is. Alright, we got the seal out. Here's that little spacer washer I talked about. You'll notice it's got a little step to it. So you want the step facing up when you go back together with it. God, I can't believe I damaged that tube. Anyway, another component that was inside this fork tube that usually falls out when you first take it apart, it weighted a little bit, is this piece here. This, you'll see, we'll put this on the end of the valve shaft that's still attached to the bike. We'll just use a little bit of grease or Transgel is what I like to use, and just kind of glue it into place before we put it all back together. Anyway, so that's getting the seal out. Now we got to start cleaning some stuff up. Since the odds of me actually getting monetized by YouTube, for fixing cars and motorcycles, is not likely to happen. I'm not likely to ever get monetized because, well, my videos are pretty crappy and people don't want to watch them. So what I think I'll do in the future is start a chemical company that specializes in making brake clean, because there's always a demand for that. Yeah, she's been leaking a long time, so we'll get her all hosed down with the old brake clean. Make sure you clean the inside out real good. These areas here where the seal has to go in, make sure that's a nice smooth surface so when the seal goes in it can slide in easily. Any pits or gouges or debris, you want to get all that cleaned out real good. And then the bushing, sometimes these bushings will actually slide out. Push them back in. They need to stay in there. And then clean the very bottom of the tube down there. Dirt and debris accumulate down there. A lot of times I'll take a long screwdriver like this guy here and stuff a rag on the other end of it here and stuff a rag down there and make sure I get all that stuff out. So I want to get these cleaned up nice. I'm going to do my cleaning outdoors where the fumes and the vapors, won't accumulate. Yeah, I like a good brake cleaner buzz now and again, but then when I go to put the forks back together, I'll probably leave a part out. So we're going to try to minimize the fumes. Boy, this thing's filthy. Goodness. So I'm trying to get these caps cleaned up. You got to get all the schmutz out of the groove here for the new O-ring. Also want to clean out this groove here where the new hydraulic lip seal will go. This one's not too bad. This one's got a lot of rust. So I'm going to get in there with a wire brush attachment and get as much of that rusty, crusty stuff out of there as possible. They do accumulate moisture from sitting out in the elements. Now, these are the hydraulic lip seals I talked about. Hydraulic supply place. Kind of, you wouldn't expect that, but that's just how they're designed. And they fit into this groove. I got these cleaned up as best I could. Which one is it? This one. This one's really, really badly rusted. Cleaned it out the best I could. But this dust seal really is just to keep dust out. It's not holding any kind of fluid pressure per se. So even with that little bit of rust in there still, it's going to do its job just fine. Try to keep the dust out of the actual fluid seal, which is, you know, mounted in the fork well below it. Okay, so there's that. And then some just ordinary O-rings. A lot of times you can just go to the local hardware store and they've got a selection of O-rings to go into this groove. And that's basically what holds it to the fork tube. And once again, it's not under any kind of fluid pressure or anything. So if there's a little bit of pitting or rust underneath that surface, it's not going to be catastrophic. It'll still do its job. Make sure you clean these little guys out too. These go on the end of the fork tube, of the fork valving tube thing. They do accumulate a lot of crud inside, so make sure you give them a good, you know, cleaning as well. Lots of schmutz. Yeah, this one, it's just not coming clean. It's so badly stained, and I'm not sure if it's because it was rust mixed in with the oil, but I've scrubbed with brake clean and gasoline, and I use Scotch-Brite, and it's still not coming off. So I think what's going to happen is, well, it's going to get rattle canned. It'll look better than it does now, and I've done it before. Most spray paint holds up pretty good unless you drive down, you know, gravelly roads and it chips all off. But so we'll shoot them with some silver, and I'll shoot both so they match. This one's not too bad. It came out a lot better, but well, then they wouldn't match now, would they? So rattle can time. Much better. Alright, so we'll let those set up overnight, and we'll reassemble the forks tomorrow morning when it's less than 247 degrees out. It's hot. Alright, got all our parts cleaned up and ready to go back together. Now, when we go back together, we're not going to go back together the same way we took it apart. In other words, we're not going to put the seal in the fork tube first and try to cram it up past this bushing. Because, well, you saw how hard it was to pull it down past that bushing. Going back on, as you can imagine, this bushing is going to tear up that seal pretty bad. So there is a way to do it. Now, the factory manual probably has you take the fork tube out, and then you would slide the seal down, and you would have a seal driver that pushes it into place. And well, we don't have any of that stuff. So here's the method that I use. I actually remove the bushing, and now this diameter is small enough that you can slide the seal on and put the seal on the fork tube first, and then we install the lower tube without the seal in it. Once the lower tube is in place, then we slide the seal down and just come around it very gently using a small little drift-ish tool, and we tap that seal into place. That way we avoid damaging it trying to get it past this bushing, because it is a very, very tight fit, and it has to be. This is what takes out the play in your fork tubes. All right, so to take these bushings off, you have to expand them slightly. You can just kind of grab them with your thumbnails. You don't want to pull them too hard. You can snap them. Don't want to break it. And we just want to expand it wide enough to get down past the end of the fork. And then, you know, kind of set this aside. Preferably someplace not real filthy and dirty, like my entire shop is. Now, before I put the seals and stuff in place, what I want to do, it's got some fork oil on it. I want to put a little bit of, I use trans gel. I like trans gel because it's basically just Vaseline. And the nice thing about Vaseline is it's non-reactive to different types of oil. It'll just dissolve into the oil and not create an issue. So we're just going to put a little bit of Vaseline on all these little steps here, because on most of the, well, actually this one's not too bad. Depending on the year and the model and stuff, sometimes these steps are machined into the fork tube. Can be pretty sharp, and it can actually cut the seal while you're trying to get past them. So I like to give just a little bit of trans gel to make sure we're not damaging anything, and then also put some on the seals themselves. Okay, so we're going to stack them. We're going to put the cap first. Put a little lubricant on that lip seal. And we just gently kind of work it side to side to get it past those lands. And then she slides right on up the tube. Now this one will pretty much stay, especially if you have a filthy tube like this one. But we're also going to put this spacer on at the same time. It's going to want to fall down. I'll show you how to hold that in place. Going to get a little bit of lube on the old seal. Same thing, just kind of work it a little bit side to side, because you don't really want to just jam it on there. You want to make sure we don't cut it. There we go. She slides on up. And then this guy, again, with that little step facing towards the top, she just goes right on there. And then I just use a zip tie. This is a really huge one because I'm out of normal ones. Let me make a point to find some more. But that will keep that stuff up out of the way. And now we can go ahead and put our bushing back on. Pretty simple, right guys? Pretty simple. Make sure this is all nice and clean. Get it back. Yeah, we don't, dust is, got a lot of dust in the area. You know, it gets breezy here in the afternoons. And of course the breeze brings in as much dust as possible. This is not exactly a hermetically sealed garage, so the dust definitely comes on in. Alright, bushing is back in place. Alright. And then I'll put just a little bit of lube on the outside of the bushing as well, just to make sure it doesn't fight us going back together. Now, another thing you're going to need the trans gel for, or grease, and I mentioned it before, is these little guys here. I don't know what they're called. They're some kind of little fork tube bushing thing. We want these in place because the bolt that holds the lower tube in place goes right through the bottom of this. So we're going to put a little bit of that trans gel on this valve tube, I guess is what you would call it, and that way it'll stay in place long enough for you to get that fork tube up into place. Okay, a fork tube. Let's see if I can install the wrong one on the wrong side. Yeah, been known to do that, put the wrong tube on the wrong side. That's not good. So look how pretty and shiny and full of chips and dents. That's ugly. And it's damaged. Honest to God, guys, I've done this dozens of times and I never have damaged the end of the tube like I did on this one. I don't know if it was already cracked or what the deal is. Just the bottom line is be gentle. When you go to pop that seal out, just gently do it. Don't bang on it like I did. Don't do what I do. Do what I say. Anyway, and this is our bolt. I said there was a copper seal on this particular model. It's not a copper seal. It's actually metal and rubber. So some use a copper seal, some use this one. If you can get them, I would say you probably want to replace them because rubber has certain life expectancy. But I haven't got any, so I'm going to reuse the old one. And I've been pretty fortunate. I haven't had any leak. Sometimes if the rubber looks bad on the seal, I'll just put a little bit of that oil resistant RTV on it just to give myself some insurance. This one doesn't look too bad, so we're going to go ahead and drop our tools. We're going to go ahead and install this like it is. What a place. Okay, and seal out of my way. There it is. Alright, got her all stacked up, ready to go in. Don't fall over. Alright. Once again, you may have to tap it a little to get it past the bushing, to pass the other bushing. And again, make sure your tube is nice and clean. Put a little lube on this end too, just to ensure you don't have too much trouble. Oops. Now be careful. I've had this happen before. It actually pushed the bushing out of its little groove there. If that happens, the whole thing goes into a bind and you end up damaging the bushing. So make sure your bushing stays in that land. In fact, in some cases, I've actually put a zip tie around the bushing to keep it closed around the tube so it wouldn't slide up. So just be aware that can happen. So, and in fact, it's trying to happen this time. Don't you dare do that to me. Let me put a zip tie on that. Alright, we've got a zip tie. It's going to keep the gap closed here. And that way when we put the tube on, it's not likely to hang up. And then once the tube reaches this point, it'll just knock the zip tie up and we can just reach in there and, snip it out. So we're going to persuade it on the rest of the way. And once the two bushings pass each other, then it's no longer a problem. In fact, we can now snip out our zip tie. Alright, bushings are happy, they're in place. We'll just go ahead and slide the tube all the way up and reinstall our bolt. I do not know what the torque spec is on this. It's in the book if I want to look it up. But they're usually pretty darn tight. And this thing isn't powerful enough to over torque it. So we're just going to give it about 3 ugga-duggas. And once again, don't do as I say. Look it up in the damn book. That's 3 ugga-duggas. She's in there. Can I have my Allen back? Thank you. Tried to keep my Allen. Alright, next step. We're going to go ahead and remove this zip tie because it's no longer required. And immediately my spacer washer dropped into place. I'm just confirming that it's all the way down. And now we can install the actual seal, which was, you know, the goal of this entire thing. This little guy is going to go into its location. And, okay, we're just going to walk it in with this drift. You want to make sure when you're knocking it down, you don't hit the lip or the spring. You want to make sure you're right up against the side of the tube and you're only tapping down on the outer housing of that seal, because you can damage it. Ask me how I know. Usually they go in pretty easy. It's not a super tight fit. It was a little hard pulling it out, but of course that was an old seal. This is a nice new seal. I put just a thin film of lubricant on the sides so that when it goes into the tube, it's not as restrictive. If you have a hard time getting to the seal, you can rotate to get to the other side. So you want to walk it down side by side. You don't want it to tip too much one way or the other. It's just going in pretty easily. Oh, yeah, almost there. And just make sure that you tap the seal all the way down. You see, you want to make sure this groove here is exposed so you can put that snap ring in. So we got the seal down all the way. We'll put the snap ring in. Snap ring. Come in there, Mr. Snap Ring. Grabber. Be careful putting the snap ring in. A screwdriver is a better tool than a punch, but just be real careful, because if you slip off it, you can tear the seal. Ask me how I know. Okay. And just visually look at it, you'll be able to tell if that snap ring is in on the way. It'll fit in the recess of that groove. And once it's in place, we can just go ahead and drop that cap in. You can see that the snap ring is fully seated. It's got 3 little corners that kind of stick out. And you can see the rest of it is in the groove. So our seal's not going anywhere. And now we can drop this bad boy into place. Alright, so that one is complete. We will repeat the process on this side, and then we're going to put the wheel and the fender back on. Now you may ask, what about the fork oil? We'll get to that. Now you might be asking, what on earth is this rig? Well, see, for whatever reason, could not get the seal to go in without it, flipping over. I'd knock one side down, the other side would come up. I'd knock that side down, this side would come up. And I went back and forth, 248 million times. Got a little tired of chasing it, so I just found some scrap stuffs and made a little clamp to hold one side down long enough to drive the other side in. I tell you what, this one is not making it look easy, okay? Honest, it normally goes smoother than this, guys. Normally I don't damage the tube, and normally I don't have to rig up some kind of a clamp to be able to get the seal to seat. Anyway, the seal's in now. Alright, she's all back together, but she looks a little better, huh? Not real happy with that paint. We may have to do a little bit of touching up and stuff, but it's miles better than it was. One of the things I really love about these sport cruisers are the wheels. They only came on the sport cruiser, and these are a size larger. The standard cruiser was a 16-inch. These are a 17, I believe. But they're definitely much better looking, I think. And of course, dual disc brakes. Alright, but I digress, which I do a lot of. So now we got to get some oil in these forks. Remember, we drained it all out, whatever didn't leak out. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove these caps. Now, there is a spring underneath this cap. So as we're removing the cap, we're going to be kind of pushing down. It's not a real insanely strong spring, but you do have to use a little bit of force when you're removing it. You'll feel it as you're taking the tension off of it. So we'll pull those caps off. We'll put some fork oil on it. One of the things I like to do is I like to get it on the ground when I do this. I don't want to collapse the forks and add tension to the springs. Really, all I want to do is make it nice and stable so that when we're pushing down and rotating the threads, the bike's not wobbling around and moving and stuff. There it is. Ah! Drop the nut. All right. Move this off a little. So this just threads on there. Pretty simple. There's an O-ring here. Try not to damage it. And then we're going to go ahead and put fork oil in it. The book says there's some kind of measuring device for fork oil. What I've done in the past, I've drained old forks that were not leaking badly and measured it. On the Sport Cruiser, I think I ended up putting 14 ounces in them. On the standard Cruiser, I think we only put 12 ounces in. So, I don't know how close or how accurate it is, but it beats the heck out of a leaking set of forks. Alrighty. A little bit more. Right there. We're going to call that good. Alrighty, look at that, dampening like it should, and not squirting fluid everywhere. So now the front suspension should do a nice job for us. And it looks really nice. It really makes the rest of the bike look like crap. But as we go through and do the other repairs, we'll get the rest of it kind of shined up and pretty as we go, just like we did the front end. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. We got the fork seals replaced with only minor damage to the fork tubes. Way to go, Mike. So you guys will learn from my mistakes, hopefully, when you go to do your own fork seals. They're really not that bad. Don't let them scare you or intimidate you. You know, just take your time and, you know, just do the thing. And the next episode, well, we'll get into the other stuff. We'll yank that engine out and split it apart. You guys have seen me do that before, so we'll probably abbreviate a lot. Kind of the main thing we want to focus on is the transmission components once we get the engine out and apart. So, come on back for that episode. Thanks for watching. Oh yeah, and click the buttons, you know, the little bell and the like, all those things. See you in the next episode.